Good afternoon. I appreciate everyone's patience as we try to navigate the technical challenges. Um, my name is Refugee. I'm the coordinator of the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative, and I'm excited to have what I feel will be an interactive conversation about our work, at least as it stands for the last 5 years, and how it interfaces with immigrant-led organizations and immigrant-serving organizations as well. But before we engage members of the collaborative, I just want to give you a quick overview of who we are. The Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative comprises approximately 12 foundations committed to supporting immigrant-led and immigrant-serving organizations with a vision of fostering vibrant, healthy, and flourishing immigrant communities. We have loosely 3 objectives in terms of convening and as a collaborative. We use the space to inform and share among members of organizations, learn together about issues affecting immigrant refugees in Maine, and look to foster independent and collective funding and other support for immigrant refugee communities in Maine. We'll be hearing to that. We do also have several programs which will be highlighted in today's conversation. But before we get into those programs, I would like to give the floor to Jake Grindle, who is representing Maine Health Access Foundation, who has been a pillar and a steward in terms of moving the work of the collaborative forward to kind of provide some historical context and to provide a framing for this journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Shima. And I'm so glad. It seems like your mic got a lot better right towards the end there. So I think whatever happened got fixed. But so I have been asked to sort of give a sort of early step in the story of the Immigrant and Refugee Funders Collaborative. I feel like we've made a lot of progress since I first joined the collaborative in 2016. And when I showed up, it was right on the heels of the group's first attempt at doing a collaborative joint funding venture, right? And this was a program that we designed where we raised money from a bunch of the different funders there. And it was supposed to be a capacity building project for immigrant-led organizations in the sector. And so what we did was we organized a series of workshops that were on sort of very traditional sort of nonprofit management type of topics, right? Like strategic planning and board development and fundraising and budgets and grant writing and those kind of things that I think it was a combination of things we were probably hearing from immigrant leaders they'd like some support with, but I think even more so it was probably things that the funders thought were important, right? that leaders should learn at their organizations. And so we pooled our money and we put together these workshops, but we also realized at the time, I think, that almost no like major change or support or help has come to an organization from just attending one hour workshop. So in recognizing that, we said what folks probably also need is some funding that they could use to work one-on-one with somebody to help implement what they learned at the workshop. And so we tried that, and we created this program where organizations that had come to the workshop could send us a thing and they could get $500 if they wanted to work with a consultant on one of the topics from one of the workshops. And I think I came on right after we did this, and one of my first jobs at the thing was to do sort of a breakdown, an autopsy, right, of how did this program go. And what we decided was it was pretty much a failure, right? So the workshops were fairly well attended and we got some pretty good reviews on those. And then almost nobody were we able to get resources to continue their learning. And I think it's because, I mean, so when we picked it apart, there's a number of things I think we learned. One is that $500 is not a very significant amount of money. And if we want to expect meaningful change, that's probably not what we need to be putting up to be available to organizations, right? If we want them to really build up. And the second thing is that folks had to jump through a lot of hoops and do a lot of work, right, to set up a plan to spend this $500 and then sort of show that to us to be approved for it. And I think looking back on it, there's a chance that it takes more than $500 worth of time to organize that, right, for the leader, just to get $500 worth of value back. And I think the other thing that we learned about it is that we essentially, all of these skills, many of them are useful, right? And they're important things for running many nonprofits, and they're helpful for many nonprofits. But at the same time, we spent a lot of effort trying to help ethnic community-based organizations and immigrant-led organizations look like the kinds of organizations we as funders were comfortable with funding, rather than asking, what do these organizations need to look like to do the work that they want to do, right? And so we focused the whole project around what we thought, really. And I think in the subsequent years, with the help of Shima and a lot of the other folks you're going to hear from, we sort of learned those lessons and implemented them in what we've done since. So I'll sort of hand it to the next person that's going to take the story from there.
Yeah, and before Megan jumps in, I just want to say I totally agree with you, Jake. I hope everyone is able to hear me. First of all, I hope I don't sound muffled. One of the things that came out, this predates me. I came to this work in 2017, but I recall having a conversation with members about what were some of the learnings of this specific workshop, and one particular question arose in that conversation that was brought up by a lot of the immigrant-led organizations. And this was the difference between mainstream organizations and ethnic-based organizations, and how they were positioned in terms of their relationship with philanthropy. What we were hearing in the context of that first capacity building program was that the same organizations were receiving funding, the same organizations were cultivating social capital and having access to foundations and funders. And while small, nascent, nimble, and adaptable organizations were not necessarily in the same relationships or getting access to the same resources as those organizations. So we had a collective conversation about what that meant and how that would inform our work as a collaborative. And Megan Riley will speak to our effort and what sprung out of that effort. And so I would like to invite Megan to speak to that right now.
Megan, I think you're still muted.
Oh, Megan, we can't hear you.
Megan, I'm going to ask you to log off of this and try and come back on. And Shima, if you could that's the best part of having so many folks presenting, right? If somebody's tech doesn't work, you've got so many folks to jump in. So,
yeah. Megan, I hope to get you back to this conversation. So I can speak to my role directly in this effort. And what we decided to do is look at our respective organizations and see if, really investigate this question. Who are we funding and why? And I think I was able to aggregate information. I really want to thank funders who were part of the collaborative, who were generous enough and flexible enough to provide this information for us to really deepen our work and to base our work in this specific question. Are we really invested in the immigrant refugee funders, in the immigrant refugee sector, particularly? And are the remarks, are the feedbacks that ILO immigrant-led organizations providing by way of the first capacity building initiative reflected in our grant making? And what we found, I think, across the board was that the fact that they were telling the truth, and that they were reflecting some of the challenges and the structural challenges, but also the challenges as it relates to cultivating and engaging funders in the context of nonprofit and philanthropy relationship. And so that information allowed us to really start to base our conversations and our programs to really investigate that question and really ask ourselves, why are we not invested in this sector? And what would investment look like, right? That would allow organizations large and nascent to be able to thrive and really serve their community. And I'd like to invite Loras and Jake, who were part of that conversation, to add any additional thought. But I think that was really the impetus to what we're going to be discussing in a few minutes.
Megan, you're back. Are you back?
I think so, but
oh, yay!
I was using headphones. Maybe that was the issue. It sounds like the conversation's moving along. Do you still want me to say anything about data collection? Okay. And did you hear anything I said, or pretty? No. Okay. Well, I had wonderfully pithy remarks. I was kind of building on where Jake had left off in kind of the 2016, about 5 years ago. We'd had this ECBO capacity building initiative, and it didn't work out the way we expected. At the same time, there was the Donald Trump election, which caused obviously great concern in the sector. And I think the funders were hungry for action and trying to figure out what came next and how we could be working together, kind of seeing what didn't work with the ECBO initiative. And at the same time as when we hired Shima, and we just, she's far too humble to say this herself, but bringing on a really skilled and knowledgeable coordinator was also a big part of helping us be more active together. So one of the first things that Shima undertook, in addition to helping us raise the Solidarity Fund following the Muslim ban, but that's another story, was to get really serious about understanding the data around which organizations were and were not being funded by the members of the Immigrant and Refugee Funders Collaborative. We also recognized that we were not the total universe of potential foundation supporters, but we were kind of the core funders in this space in Maine. I realized you didn't hear my introduction. So I work for a regional funder, the Clues Fund, which is based in Indianapolis, but makes grants in Maine and other New England states. So I really relied on this group for learning a lot about what was happening on the ground in Maine. So as I said, Shima really kind of took the reins and got us organized around data collection. And so 8 members of the Funders Collaborative shared our grants. And Shima had actually developed a universal list of potential grantees in the immigrant and refugee field, and we had 75 such organizations. And we learned that only half of them were being funded by the 8 foundations. Let's see, sorry. Then of those 37 that were being funded, there was still some disparity. There were 7 organizations that accounted for about half the 3.5 million. So about 1.75 million of those was concentrated in 7 organizations, which are fabulous organizations. Many of them are on the call today and nothing but praise for their work. But we saw there was also a need to broaden the pool of organizations that could be successfully competing for foundation funding, and a need to change the way that we managed foundation funding. And so I think that really laid a really important foundation for today, where we have the Immigrant-Led Organizations Fund, which is housed at Maine Initiatives and that Shima helps staff. So I think that's where I'm going to stop my part of the story and turn it over to Loras.
So there are a couple of ongoing programs that the collaborative has developed over the past few years. One is the Immigrant-Led Organization Pooled Fund, the ILO Fund. And it started in 2017 when the Broadreach Fund was shifting its work, but wanted to make sure that the work that they had been really leading in the support of immigrant and refugee communities in Maine, that was a continued priority for philanthropy in Maine. And so the ILO fund has been a mechanism for continuing the collective support of collective work, if I can say that, in this sector. And it's been really, I think, a wonderful gift to the state. It brings funders together and helps us to learn more about what the needs are of the community. Jake was really good, thank you, at sharing some of the early challenges, I think, to sort of understanding, for funders to understand what really the priorities of the immigrant and refugee communities were. And the ILO Fund, with Shima's leadership, really, it has really helped to bring resources collectively to that work. And so the way it works is that the funders meet, the collaborative meets every couple of months. Shima gives us updates about what's happening in the sector and highlights particular needs. For instance, when a large number of asylees arrived in Maine a couple of summers ago, she was able to sort of be the funders' point person, so that the organizations that were really, really stretched trying to serve the needs of that population didn't have to spend time trying to reach out to each individual funder to get the support they needed. It also provides a way of funders who may not name immigrant and refugee work in their priorities, and Sewell is one of them. We support, we're statewide, and we support a number of different communities in Maine. But it gives us a way to really support that community, I think, in a meaningful way. And for us, it complements. There are some organizations that do align with our work that we support, as well as supporting the pooled fund. And Shima had mentioned earlier, because the pooled fund is nimble, it's able to respond. So the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been a couple of points when there were just really critical needs across organizations, across ethnic groups and communities across the state. And so it's been moments like that have really shown the value of collective work, both of funders and of the organizations in the communities that we want to support. So it's been really a learning experience for us. I think that Shima's leadership in terms of helping us to understand all the range of different organizations that are, and the work has grown immensely over the past 4 years since the ILO fund started. And it's just an exciting way, I think, to bring critical operating support and emergency assistance to the organizations that are doing important work.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. And before I ask John to join the conversation, I just want to provide what would be the through line. I feel like it's really important to say that as I came on board, I was housing the Immigrant-Led Organization Fund, which was a program that supports and supported nascent, grassroots, ethnic-based immigrant organizations. And it really felt important for me to mention this, because I think I brought the objective, the goals of this program into the conversation of the IRC, and it served, I think, in presenting that kind of adaptive, nimble, responsive program to the specific group who were becoming more and more increasingly invested, right, and interested in the communities that we were interested in and we wanted to support. And so, as Jake mentioned, we had this capacity building program that asked us, right, that highlighted this question. We aggregated data that basically showed us that what we were, what was being stated was right. And so we decided that we needed to do something about this. And so what we really wanted to move from is from a transactional way of engaging with organizations, and in this context, immigrant-led organizations, to a relational strategy. And so we, and Jake was part of this committee, and Andrew Berry, who's co-facilitating this conversation as well, was part of this committee. We decided to do a funder learning tour. And it felt really important for us to ground this program in community. So it was a community-centric and community-led program. We went to the Lewiston area. We talked with folks. We engaged folks in Portland and said, how would you like to engage with funders? What feels like priority conversations for you? We want this to be valuable. We want this to not be extractive, right? And that you would find value in this type of programming. And so we really implemented the perspective and feedback of immigrant-led organizations and ethnic-based organizations. And I feel confidently to say that this was the first time that more than 80 funders and foundations were engaging directly in person with immigrant-led organizations. And one of the things that I'm hoping John can speak to, John Ochira, who now represents Maine Community Foundation, but at the time was representing an ethnic-based organization, is to talk through that process. Like, what was the most valuable thing that you appreciated about this process? What are some of the learnings and probably feedback about such an engagement where it engages foundations and funders with the communities that are supposed to be supported, or we want to support and invest in?
Yeah, thank you so much, Seema, and I hope you guys can all hear me. So I come into the story latest compared to my other colleagues who have spoken today. And the point would be at the funder learning tour. And as a community leader at the time, when Seema reached out and shared the idea and the opportunity, I was thinking, oh my God, this is what we need as a smaller organization, to be able to show our faces and be able to share, some of the things that we see in the relationship with funders. It was really important to me that I would be in front of funders to share my work and some of the struggle that I face as a small nonprofit organization. It was really important to be able to do that to funders. And we're doing that as groups, obviously. Many of the small immigrant-led organizations were part of that panel, which really gave us a sense of belonging in that space. And I think that was part of the theme, that we belong here in Maine, and that made a difference in our efforts. As a small nonprofit organization, sometimes you feel like nothing is working for you in terms of trying to find funding opportunities. Sorry. It feels like sometimes you're defeated, and it was so good to be able to have a platform and be able to share and start a relationship with some of the people in the funding community and make that connection and have our faces be seen, so that some possible assumption that might be present can be eliminated. I think it's hard when you're not in the room. People might not know the work that you're doing, and I think that learning process led to some of the improvement that we see here. And I think the as an immigrant on the collaborative, sitting on the funder's side of the table now, I feel like it's so important that we're able to give voice and give space to the people who are doing the work, because at that point I was seeing something that maybe my colleague on the other side weren't able to see, and I think that that's an important thing for us as we move forward as a collaborative.
Thank you, John. Yeah, and in a minute or so, folks who are on the panel will speak to that. I'd like to acknowledge and appreciate all the organizations that I have a privilege of working with and partnering with who have attended this workshop to speak to our relationship and the work that they've done. But before I open the floor to them, I just want to say we're kind of going in a chronological way where we want to highlight how we've moved from a space of basically networking and sharing information to collaborative, and bilateral funding. And using the ILO, the Immigrant-Led Organization Fund, as one of the mechanisms to really invest in this program. And I would like to recognize and acknowledge that, Stool Foundation, MEHAF, Gorman, and other organizations were able to see the added value in investing in the Immigrant-Led Organization Fund to be able to support priorities and needs that were arising across the year, right? And be able to provide funding so that we could support folks on the ground. And on the heels of the Funder Learning Tour, we had an influx of about 500 asylum seekers that came to Portland. And literally, it was like 2 weeks after we had convened, we had a funders meeting. We said, here's an issue that feels really important. And here's an opportunity to kind of reflect some of the learnings that we had during the Funder Learning Tour. What are we going to do about the situation? How are we going to support communities that are coming to Maine, but also communities who are receiving, right, these individuals? So we decided to prioritize our effort, both in terms of funding and technical support, to immigrant-led organizations that were doing invaluable work during the summer and until the end of the year, quite frankly, who were not necessarily valued in their way of supporting organization, the individuals who were on in their community at the Expo, because probably they reflected the community, right? And they were small and nascent, and for some foundation, maybe they weren't structured in a way that would allow them to support them. So we used the Solidarity Fund to pull funds together to support 4 organizations that are providing critical support. And I want to name those organizations because I think they were really the impetus for us to be able to be adaptive and use the ILO Fund program in 2020 to be responsive and adaptive to the conditions and priorities of immigrants. And so Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, the Congolese Community of Maine, the Angolan Community of Maine, and Gateway Community Services were organizations that we felt we needed to prioritize, we needed to support as they were supporting asylum seekers in the Expo and post the Expo. And I think that allowed us, using that specific situation, to understand that the function of the ILO Fund is to be able to be adaptive, to be responsive, to meet the priorities of organizations. And in 2020, and I won't be long, in 2020, we were able to support 40 organizations and invested more than $1 million in terms of, in the context of the RFC, and more than that, bilaterally, to support immigrant-led organizations that were responding to the needs and priorities of communities that were deeply impacted by COVID. And we were able to disperse funding in early 2020 and later part of the year to support that effort. And so I just wanted to bring value to the way in which we're working now, where we are able to bring forward concerns and priorities, and we're also able to respond accordingly to really kind of reflect the priorities and needs of the organizations that we work with and we partner with. And it felt really important to include them in this conversation and have them speak to their own experience and provide us with their perspective on what an authentic relationship with foundations in the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative, if we want to contextualize this, would look like. What has worked, what has not worked, right? What are some of the feedbacks that would be helpful for folks who are working with foundations in terms of how they build authentic relationships with immigrant-led organizations and just BIPOC organizations in general. And so without further ado, I would like to call the attention. I feel like there are only 9 folks who can be on screen at the same time, but if you could be generous enough once you stop talking to turn off your camera, that would be really helpful. But all the organizations that are on this call, that is the question that I bring to you. What is an authentic relationship look like for you and your organization with respect to foundations? And in particular, if you feel like you could speak to maybe the relationship with the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative or the Immigrant-Led Organization Fund. If you feel called to that, please feel free to share that. What I feel feels really important in this conversation is provide critical feedback about what has worked and what has not. So we're able to take away pointers after this conversation.
Can I just jump in? With this many people, I think that it'd be really helpful if you were able to call on individual folks and kind of manage that.
Great. I think I'm seeing Hebo on my left, so I'll call you to answer this question. And if you can keep your answers under 3 minutes, that would be great, recognizing there are multiple people on the phone.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Shima. Mostly what worked is, to just give you an example, is we have health literacy that we always worried about what's the next funding will come from, so the consistency of it. And then out of that consistency also came that, the reaction of the community that we were serving, because women's health, it's something that's taboo, and we have to do a lot of boot work and a lot of outreach and things like that used to be something that we did. And by having that consistency, that was cut down right before COVID. People showed up on the day and time. It was a Saturday afternoon. So that kind of cut down to the program kind of evolve on its own. It's by having that consistency. And after COVID, it's still on a Zoom women's health. So we have close to 30 people who come. So that it created a program that is more sustainable, that's helping the community in a sense that it created a platform. And that kind of shows that the idea and having a program that takes its own life, and women coming on a Wednesday. I just came out of that today, every other week. So it's a Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Imagine that, parents coming through Zoom by WhatsApp. So we have to use. So it's kind of having a powerful program that is that has its own life. So, but the side of what did not work, mostly, it was a learning curve. I see things as things that happen for a reason. So you learn from those, and but at the same time, the gathering was also a good thing. We used to come together and we will learn from each other. It was two-way street, it seemed, because when other agency come, you learn what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that conversation created a platform as well for other agencies to work with each other that were working silos, and collaboration came out of it. Yeah, I guess I'm up with my 3 minutes, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Ibo. And the next person I see on my screen is Abdullahi Ali. Are you able to join us right now?
Yes, I'm sorry. Give me 1 minute so that I can try to turn on my video.
Not to work. Okay. Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, everyone. And for me, I just want to start again. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Abdullahi Ali with Gateway Community Services. What worked? I think for us and many immigrant folks, one question was always the issue of capacity. That has been a question for at least every time we had applied for a grant. Do you have the capacity to do this work or meet the requirements? And we always ask, if there's no one that's willing to invest in that capacity, how are we going to be able to develop or that capacity that's required? So that was one obstacle every time. So that was, I believe, one thing that, learning these different, funders and these collaborative, we were able to break. And I think, one of the things also that competing, we have been competing for funding for organizations that have been around for a long time and that have more resources and in many cases have the same culture. When you are looking in the eyes of the funders, what they are looking for, that culture they are used to, we are coming from a different background. We are, most of us, if not all of us, are new to this country. And our way of approaching this is different than what the funders are used to. So bridging that gap was also another very important thing. But then I think that level of also trust and support was also very important. What I believe, as Hiba said, I think that consistency, knowing that you are getting this funding and in many cases address the operational part of it, not in many cases attached to one specific thing, that was also really helpful because that addresses again the issue of capacity. And in many cases, when you are given a funding for one thing, but then you are supposed to be spending that money on that specific project, but no one is talking about the operation part of it, then that is when we also sometimes find we don't have the resources in order to be able even to do this work. But I think also that communication, we rarely, had funders checking on us and, finding how things are working and, what's working and what not. But then I think through this collaborative, I think we had that ongoing conversation and relationship, unlike other instances where the only time you talk to a founder is if you're providing a report or you're applying for a grant. And sometimes you don't even know how that will be received. But that, relationship building and support, continuous support was really helpful. And I know I have limited time. I don't know if I've used all my 3 minutes, but I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. That was really, thank you, Hibo. Thank you, Abdullahi. That was really valuable. The next person that I see on my screen is Zoe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Salul. I'm the Executive Director of New England Arab American Organization. Thank you for allowing us this space to share our voice and be part of this session. Definitely the work that you worked on with building an immigrant refugee funders collaborative, really allowed us to see funders really being able to create, as Abdullahi mentioned, and this was very important for us, to create these deep relationships, to ask the questions, to create the balance and listen, to support and understand what the specific nonprofit is going through. And then going back and their willingness to review the process, refine it and repeat it and do these small tweaks. I feel for these years, we feel that the philanthropy or the funders in this group, they're part of not only giving or supporting financially, they're more interested or on the ground with us, knowing about the need, wanting to do the impact and creating that capacity for us to continue the work. So this was actually very well received, especially during the crisis of COVID, where even without us asking, we'll go and we say, oh my gosh, the money is going to be done. And all of a sudden, Shima will call, or Main Community Foundation or MIHAF, and here is a check coming in to continue the work, which really creates the support that we all needed to continue the work and to keep on responding to the need of the people we serve. So definitely, we feel that the role is changing and it's in a stronger way to help us, stay for good, help us grow with while building a stronger structure for us. And, knowing that we can lean on all of the funders that are part of this group to know what the impact that we're doing. So we thank you for that. For me, I have all positive things to say, from learning from the coaches that were assigned, the learning through the Invest in People of Color Fund, or the technical assistance through MIHAF, or other special support that we receive from main initiatives and others was great. So we thank you for your willingness to really move forward and create this platform for us to find the space together.
Thank you. I feel really honored to hear all these positive things and great things that you've been able to get from your experience with the IFC and ILO and other foundations in terms of shifting their perspective. I want to just call to the attention of things like Zoe just mentioned, right? The flexibility. What are the things I think we are really interested in understanding what are the things that feel, in the last year, things have shifted in terms of how funders engage with nonprofits. What are the things that feel this really works well in terms of building authentic relationship, right? This not so much, right? Or I'm calling attention to this particular way of engaging with us, or a particular situation or priority or need or challenge that one is faced with. And I so appreciate hearing the perspective of the folks who just spoke in terms of the flexibility and the ability to sustain their work by way of providing unrestricted operating funding. But I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that, what we're looking for is also comprehensive perspective on that relationship. So if there are things that we need to be paying attention to, please don't shy away from sharing those things, because we really want to bring it back to our work and the conversations that we'll have moving forward, to ensure that we are building authentic relationship with you and other organizations that are in the sector. And with that said, I'm going to call to the attention of Fauzia, who's next on my screen.
Hello, everyone. I want to say, I think prior to COVID, as also as a small and then new organization, it was really hard to ask operational support, because you feel some kind of way about asking for a staff support, even though we were lacking, staff capacity. And I think with COVID-19, a lot of the hierarchy, the power imbalance between funders and nonprofits was kind of alleviated somewhat, where you didn't feel as if you feel, bottom and you're reaching out to somebody higher than you. And I think that allows a lot of us here to even have the relationship that we have with all of you today. Because I feel like the power imbalance of funder to, organization was reduced, in my opinion anyway, a little bit. And so I think what helped us, even during the COVID-19, was having that relationship that seemed more organic and more meaningful, as opposed to, building up the relationship where, for example, before COVID, as any organization knew you're building your organization, you are told that you have to build a lot of street level bureaucracy, right? Where you have to spend time with the funder, you got to sip, tea with them, you have to get to, have to sell yourself. And I feel like for a lot of the immigrant-based organizations, that was very hard. One, it was unnatural to us because of our country of origins, we don't have that. And so learning that, skill was really hard. But what I want to say is that with now, and because of the pandemic, a lot of the funders seem like they're more willing to understand our work, whether it's collective or silo. They're more willing to, lend an ear and listen to us. And I agree with, so we said, shadowing our work sometimes, not micromanaging us, but shadowing our work also gives a value to our work. Once in a while, come and look at our work, how we, structure our work. It's not just about funding, because when you talk about funding, it's almost as if I'm the beggar and somebody's giving me the money, as opposed to funders seeing this as a return investment. Whatever little you give it to us, the return investment is more than you give it to us. So I think it's a valuable to our existence and to our work, that you don't see the funding just as a funding, but you also see us as equal value partner, and come down sometimes and, walk on our boots. Yeah.
Thank you, Fauzia. The next person that I see on my screen is Marfine. Marfine, are you able to hear us? We'll come back to you. Claude, you're next. Oh, never mind. It seems like you're on screen.
Yes. All right. Gotta love technology. No, thank you for having me here, Shima, and the collaborative to talk about our experience here at the Cambodian Community Association. I think it was really a lifesaver, both organizationally and also for the many individuals that have been impacted by the funds that have come our way. And I really want to draw attention to the deep impact and the gratitude that we have for the unrestricted funds, general operations funds, because that allowed for a level of flexibility that I know that the word that's been used is nimble over and over again. It allowed us to be nimble with regard to how to respond to this crisis in the pandemic and all of the interrelated issues that came up, whether that was housing or helping people with unemployment or applying for Medicaid or main care, Social Security assistance, and so it really helped us, be able to meet the needs that were coming up that weren't necessarily direct sort of health related needs, and had the funds been sort of restricted to just sort of helping with let's just say just translation for COVID testing and COVID appointments, we wouldn't have been able to help in terms of families who had to quarantine for two weeks and couldn't go out for food and didn't have access to paid sick leave or things of that nature. And so the flexibility of the funds that were sent for us is not only showed to us that you were willing to trust us to be innovative, to be nimble, to be to engage in the rapid response, but it really helped us to also realize our own capacity in many ways, and our own in areas that we could stretch and grow, and it also allowed us, I think this is important, the unrestricted funds to also dream a little bit, to see what we could do as an organization in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a pandemic, dealing with so many headwinds and sort of a perfect storm of different things. It really showed us that, yeah, we can do this and we can do it well. In that way also, it sort of showed the funding community that, the many ECBOs and grassroots organizations. I say grassroots because many of us are not full-time, not even paid part-time. We're volunteers, most of us. And so imagine you've seen what we can do in a volunteer capacity. Imagine what can be done when our organizations are staffed and we have boots on the ground that are doing the work. And so I just really wanted to touch on that piece. And then the final piece is that it might be different for me personally, because I've had many years in the nonprofit world, but data collection was a huge thing for me because there wasn't a lot of data on the Cambodian Mainer population, sort of loose ideas of what towns they lived in, but no breakdowns of household size, intergenerational households, no idea of income levels, education levels. And so through the care package program that we had, rapid response program we had people sign up, and in many cases we had volunteers call them and collect some additional information around education, household income, and household size. That really helped us round out not only the demographics of our service population, but also gaps, areas of need, and opportunities that we could dream about in the future. So I just want to say that.
Thank you, Marfina. And I will take from your comment and your feedback the question of, like, imagine if we're fully funded staff doing this work, what is our potential and our impact? And I mean, that is something that we'll bring back to the conversation that we have in the context of the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative. And I just want to call attention to the fact that the immigrant refugee sector is complex. It is robust, it is innovative, and 2020 showcased that. Their ability to have a sector that immediately responded to the needs and priorities of the respective communities was invaluable to observe, to be in conversation and in partnership with organizations that were on the ground supporting organization. And that in itself reflected that there was an emerging and growing sector that was providing invaluable impact in terms of their ability to serve populations, and in particular immigrant populations in Maine. The next person on my screen is George.
Thank you, Shima, and I must commend the work that everybody here from the immigrant community do, and also having our funders available. It's a great thing, and I can just summarize what worked well in three things. One, the accessibility of the funders was very impressive, and I must say that every time that you needed someone, whether you have a question, technical question or organizational question, they were there. And through that accessibility, we were able to clearly assess the needs within each organization. And I think as Shima mentioned, the fact that that through those accessibility in the conversation with immigrant-led organizations, priorities were able to be established. And that's a very important thing that we have to mention here, because you cannot meet the needs unless you know them. So the fact that you're all accessible and but also communication was very available, meeting and also being able to clearly assess the needs into the organizations that are led by the immigrants, and after that be able to establish the priorities is a very important thing. And I remember, I have to talk from my own experience, when COVID hit on March 2020, and we, my organization, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is George Budagun. I'm here with Jumbo Africa and Ladder to the Moon Network. So we have two sources of funding. One is advertisements, but the second one is grants and sponsorship. And we were all, when the COVID started, we were just concerned that we were going to lose all the advertisement, because everybody were concerned if the business were going to stay open and nobody was going to advertise and all that. But when we start getting funds from many initiatives, it was just encouraging to see that there are people who are thinking about the needs that are there that cannot be stopped by the fact that COVID is there. So I can go on, but let me just say that again, thank you for the work that we do. But also let me say that the fact that we're here and talking about the issues that concerns us all, and the fact that we're learning from one organization to another one, and all those, collaboration is very important in any process of growth and any process of innovation and anything they want to do. You just need to be informed from people who are doing better than those who are struggling. They can learn from the ones that are doing well. I can see some organizations that have been here for many years, and the other ones are just starting. And the fact that we're all now aware of who's there, who's where, and be able to learn from one another, but also having somebody who's there to mentor us in terms of accessing the resources is just an amazing thing. And again, I must say thank you for everything that you do. And we're here to stay and also to learn from one another and get more information, because it's very important in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And I just want to call to attention to the time. We're having a very enriched conversation, but I want to make sure that the folks who are on the call are able to talk. So I apologize for this request. Keep your comments 2 minutes max to allow the folks who are on the call to be able to provide feedback. And with that, Claude, you're next.
Thank you, Shima. Thank you for inviting us, Prosperity Man. Claude, Executive Director and the founder of Prosperity Man. Most of the things have been said, and we want to thank you for the work you have done. This reminds me actually that where I'm sitting in my conference room at the office, that's where you and many others were sitting in 2019 when we were actually looking at the issues of asylum seekers who were at the expo and trying to figure out how we could prioritize the organization that you mentioned earlier. It was very successful, and we thank you and the team that supported the early organization that continued to support in 2020. Kudos. Second piece is related to the trust that everybody said. Really, that trust is the key to pieces that many ECBO could not afford. After Broadreach went off, we thought maybe these ECBO were going to really lose their funding. My organization was one of the first funding that received from Broadreach for 6 consecutive years. And then when we went off, we were growing, but I was more worried about the smaller entry nonprofit. But thank you that your organization collaboration also came alive. Third, I just like the comments that the previous speaker just mentioned. The capacity is still needed. And how so? These organizations, specifically those ECBO that really have president of communities and that come and go, they really leave a little bit some gaps. So that is something that the collaborative funding needs to think about, how to stabilize these organizations going forward so they can stay live. And the example that this pandemic has shown, not only that this collaborative funding helped us even to underwrite some of the help from the state, but really the state relied on ECBO to operate on this COVID education outreach. So it's critical that this really collaborative or the ECBO continue to operate. In Prosperity Man, in last year alone, helped more than 100 individuals with unemployment. Think about if we didn't have funding from a general operation that we needed to apply for general operation to support those individuals, even though unemployment is not what we do. But we had to do it because it was the moment, the crisis we were in. And we were so pleased to have a generosity of your funding, Man Community Foundation, Sewer Foundation, Sam Cohen Foundation, you name it. All those really, they were so critical to help us in our moment, which was very critical. And the last, I just want to say that this ECBO capability they have shown and the collaboration they have worked together in last year to this year is a statement that really the community, the stakeholders, the funders need them to continue to be operational. So we don't want to keep repeating ourselves, but Shima, you are our hero. You did everything you could. You understand the needs. You provided where the needs were. And we want you to be more successful. Please let us know what we can do to support this initiative going forward so the collaborative funding can continue to be on. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. My work is only possible because of the work that I do with you all. The next person that I have on my screen is Mufalo. Oh, we're not able to hear Mufalo. It looks like, oh, there you go.
What's the question, Shima? I'm trying to be sensitive.
Yeah, the question I know it was a while ago, but it's just what's working, what has not been working, what are something that you want to call attention to in terms of the relationship between ILOs and ECBOs and philanthropy. And in this context, the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative, which comprises of all the foundations that support you, the likes of Maine Community Foundation, MIHAB, Maine Initiatives, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think my colleagues, I think, have mentioned stuff of, I think I've talked a little bit about, a lot about what's worked. I think I'd like to maybe to talk about, moving forward, the work, there's a foundational work that has been done. And again, my name is Mufalo. I'm the executive director for the Maine Human Rights Coalition. And so a year later, or is it a year some 3 months since the pandemic hit, and since we, came together as, first of all, ethnic-based organizations as well as mainstream organizations that support our platform, and then the collaboration with the funders, especially the ILO funders. We built on a lot because of the experience that we had with the Expo. We had a place to start from, and so what we learned from the Expo, we used that not only with our work in responding to COVID, we also used that, with the collaboration on how to move the resources, because it was very important, in the emergency, to move the resources in a timely manner. And so that work going forward is what I would like to elevate, that what we have created, we created a structure that was not there. We created a structure that worked in terms of moving resources in a timely way. But not only just moving the resources, making sure that, the reporting pieces of it were in place, the administrative pieces of it were in place. So I want to elevate elevate us to a place of where what we have created now to cement this work, in a non-emergency. Now that we're taking off the masks, now that we are opening up our offices, now that we're going back, to the grocery stores, to the schools, our relationship that we've built, especially with these funders who've moved very quickly, that becomes something that we build on. I want, as the Main Immigrant Rights Coalition, we, not only advocated for systematic change, we also, with the work that we did and also learned during the Expo, we exemplified what change should look like. And so I urge, this funding group that especially has stepped in an emergency, that you have exemplified what change looks like. You have not only spoken or advocated from one funder to the other, you've exemplified yourself. So you put money down, and then another funder did put money down, and the pot grew. I want to hope that going forward we can come back in especially the organizations on this panel. We can come back and say, okay, going forward, what does that look like? How can we create or cement what we've done in the past 1 year? Because especially, I just learned of, very new communities that are coming in, and the sooner they come in, we kind of wrap them in quickly, and you can be connected. So we've been able to not only just connect, our communities with the resources, but we've also connected, communities and organizations to the funders, so that they don't have to go through this whole application process, and somebody somewhere who doesn't know them weeds them out because they're not known, or they're not trusted, or or they didn't dot all the I's and cross all the T's in the application. How can we create systems that can be able to bring these organizations together? So I just want to hope that we can continue working, because it's been success, but we also fear, especially with our organizations, that once everything opens up, everybody's like, yeah, that's it, back to normal.
Yeah, and this is critical feedback, Wafala, and I hope to continue this conversation in the context of just the ILO fund, but also with the IRC to understand what's the best way and the most valuable way to support organizations that are supporting immigrants. We have about 7 minutes left, so we have 3 other folks that I would like for them to join in the conversation. Siona, you're the next on my screen. If you could try to limit your conversation under 2 minutes, that would be great. I will be sharing the names of the organizations that are on screen. If you're interested, for participants and attendees in the work that they're doing, you'll have that information when we conclude.
Oh, thank you very much, Shima. My name is Sionan Bizani, and I'm president of the Angolan community of Maine. I think a lot of stuff have been said. Just so to put it out there, mostly we as a small organization, let's say that like this, we have been suffering a lot when it comes to finding all this stuff to be recognized in a level that's it's like a bigger level because we are too small. So what's happening is like people ask us about capacity, and at the same time you cannot have the capacity if you don't have staff. You know, to have staff help you to build a capacity, and then to go out there, compete for funds or whatever stuff that is out there. And then because we don't have fund, and then we don't have capacity, at the same time, we are now all the time when it come problem, we have crisis is created, and then we are called. We, people who don't have capacity, people who don't qualify for the fund, are called to solve the problem, to solve the crisis. So not only it damage everything, life itself, the people, but also we are being all the time reacting instead of being proactive and then kind of stop the crisis. So it was very, very good to see the fund coming our way. Even if we don't have capacity, let me do that like this. So, and then we had to show the work. What we did, it's known, and then we tried to do this in our best capacity again, just to make to solve the problem. So important. We are talking now, when we talk vaccine, vaccine, we are talking vaccine. Here after the vaccine have been developed or whatever stuff that has been put in place, there is a program in the government already to distribute the vaccine, and then we come in, what we're gonna do? We cannot be proactive if we don't have stuff that we need. And then those stuff thinking proactively in order to avoid the crisis. If for us to have the personnel, we need help to come our way. Our community needs it. There is so many things we can talk about, but I want to be very respectful of time. So I just want to ask to give us the opportunity to have the capacity. And then somebody said, luck. I don't believe in luck, but I believe that the preparedness, when it meets opportunity, that's what is luck. So let us be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Siona. And I will call on MPC to perhaps have a subsequent conversation about what you just shared and what everyone shared, which I feel is an important conversation about reactive versus proactiveness in the context of the work that you're doing. I'm going to call on next to Beatrice. And Beatrice, if you really can keep your comments under 2 minutes, as we have 2 other folks on the call, that would be great. And we'll try to wrap up at 5:10.
I'm going to try to be brief. First, my name is, and I'm the executive director of the Intercultural Community Center located in Westbrook. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for inviting me to this platform. It's really great. getting a lot from this. So when I took over as the executive director, it was in the middle of the pandemic. So you said what didn't went well. So that was a challenging time for me. But having people like Shima, like John, and other people guiding me, introducing me to funders, referring me to potential funders that I can reach out to, that was really great support. And the guidance from you and from other leaders of the immigrant-led organizations were really like a shoulder that I could lean on. Thankful for all of you. So in the middle of the pandemic, I mean, when the pandemic hit, that's when we realized how important the work that we do. Well, we knew the work that we do was important, but it was even more critical during the pandemic, considering that the people we serve are like, they have English as the second language, they needed support. We have after school program and the DOT program, but the parents were expressing the needs, but without having some funding, like the funding that we received from some of the foundations that are here, maybe it wasn't going to be as much as possible as it was, but everything happened because of the funding from foundation, like your foundation, like Men Initiative, like Men Community Foundation, and other organizations. Especially, I'll echo the person who says who talked about the general operating funds. That's really what we need the most. We need even the restricted funds, but getting the unrestricted fund or the general operating funds was really great during this time of the pandemic, because we kept realizing the needs that we have in the community that we should respond to. I don't want to take much of your time, I know the time is up. I would like to thank you, and I wish maybe suggest we continue doing this and maybe improving, getting more experience from the people who have more experience than us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatrice. And yes, I feel like we should continue this conversation, and we'll find a way in which we can engage in future conversations. I think this is a critical conversation. So the next person on my screen, before last, is Abby.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to skip over a lot of things and just sort of get to the, you were asking about the ideal relationship, and I think that you have pretty much built that ideal relationship in terms of the funding looking like a partnership, in terms of the funders provide some critical resources that we need, and then the community organizations providing the sort of the on the ground things in the systems and the connections that are needed. So from that respect, I really have no criticism in that. When I just look sort of further, and I think in a lot of ways we're having a hard time coming up with sort of any kind of negative feedback, because it's so new, it's such a radical change, and it's such a relief from what the past looks like in terms of creating this competitive process. And instead, this sort of generous trust-based funding model gives us room really to be truly collaborative, because the funders are talking to each other and it allows us space. And I'm just thinking about how there was critical bridge funding that we needed while we waited for the government grant to the contract to finally be encumbered and to finally get that check. But we were at a really state where we had people who we needed to pay. And not only is it illegal not to pay people on time, it's also unethical. And so I was really in this tight space. And, the collective kind of stepped in and gave us more than what I said was the absolute minimum that we needed. And that is floating us now as well. And it's really, really important that kind of, and I think that's where a generous trust-based funding looks like. And so, that's so great, but also, like, so when I know that you need criticism too, like some critique, and so I'm thinking, trying to project ahead, like what could possibly be. And so this is like all not really based on experience, but guessing, conjecture, but I feel like perhaps maybe like some feedback from the funders of what kind of, what did you expect, and did we meet those expectations that kind of feedback and continue the conversation of, and not like, you know, you didn't meet the expectations, we're going to cut it off, but more like in a sort of developmental way of, you know, this was a little bit different than what we thought you were going to do. And, you know, where is this coming from? Sort of conversation could be really helpful in terms of growing us, because we also need accountability. So, I mean, that's where I'll leave it at in terms of just sort of projecting to the future of what could possibly be some of the things that we could be doing differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. And I really want to like harp on the trust-based framework that you presented, because I think that is really at the core of our work and what we try to do. And I'm happy that it's reflected across the comments that are made. I recognize that we are at 5:11, but there are two other individuals. One was unable to join us that I think is really important and valuable to hear from them. I'll have Mohammed go first and really try to, and then Papi last, and really try to wrap this up in the next 4 minutes if we can. And I appreciate everyone's patience. I think it's important to hear everyone who's on their call, who've made, you know, who's provided time to be part of this conversation. So I want to make sure that every voice is reflected in this conversation. So Mohammed, if you can go next, that'd be great. Okay, it looks like Mohammed maybe perhaps is unable to join us. Papi, can you go next? Oh, we're unable to hear you. We can't hear you. Perhaps removing the headphones. Are you able to, we can't hear you. No, it looks like.
Emma, can you ask Papi to look at the left of the screen where there is a microphone to unmute himself?
Yes, thank you, Claude. Yes, Papi, if you can look on the left, on the top left, you should see a microphone and a camera icon. Okay, it looks like Papi and Mohammed are unable to join us, and I just want to appreciate everyone on the call. I reached out to each individual to ensure that they had availability to join our call, and I don't take for granted that these folks are on the ground doing the work and have a limited time. And I deeply appreciate them making time to participate in what I feel is a very critical conversation. And I hope to continue this conversation, whether in the context of MPC or in the RFC. This is a critical conversation that I hope to bring back to the Funders Collaborative, and hope to either define a program that will allow us to have the space and time to have this conversation. We'll take back all the feedback that you've provided. I am privileged to work with you all and to be in partnership. And my work is only here because of the work that you do. And I just want to show appreciation for you all. I also want to show appreciation for the members of the Immigrant Refugee Funders Collaborative, Jake Grindle, Megan Riley, Loris Lorenz, and Jonah Chira, who shared part of our journey as a collaborative and who are invaluable in terms of moving our work forward. We are excited about this new journey and this journey that allows us to deepen relationship with all these organizations that are on the call and others who are unable to join us. And we hope that we are rooting our relationship through a trust-based framework. And that we are able to build authentic relationship with these organizations, and that in turn allows us to like really tangibly value the relations that we have with these organizations and evaluate the impact that we have as a sector in terms of supporting and trusting that immigrant-led organizations and immigrant leaders are the experts of their own communities, right? And only need the resources and the support to be able to provide support to their respective communities. So I thank you all for being patient, for being part of this conversation, and I hope to continue this conversation in a different context, whether through the MPC conference or other programs that we may develop in the next couple of months or a year. So have a great afternoon, and I appreciate everyone on this call. Thank you.